Hey guys, it's Bearboy1990 here, and today I want to talk about the political ideology of redemptionism and why it has such a damning effect on our political system. So, first of all, what is redemptionism? Redemptionism is basically a socio-political ideology that came out of the South after the Civil War. It was the result of Southern Democrats and Confederate veterans basically trying to theorize or come up with an explanation of why they lost the war and how they could potentially, quote unquote, rise again, bring the South to a semblance of greatness again. Well, redemptionism didn't just stay in the South, it spread all over the United States after the Civil War, and it was a populist reactionary movement. It focused heavily on Judeo-Christian, primarily Protestant Christian values. It valued white Anglo-Saxon culture over all other cultures, and anybody that was seen as not a part of that group was seen as a threat to the status quo of society. So what I really want to get to people is to understand why I am bringing up redemptionism. Redemptionism was Donald Trump's platform. He was going to make America great again. And let's understand what that appeals to and why that appeals to so many Americans. Well, so many Americans are influenced by redemptionism. We have to redeem the republic from our failings. Donald Trump is not the first Republican candidate to adopt this idea. Richard Nixon is a perfect example of that, when he basically said there was a silent majority out there who are being preyed upon by the loud and rancorous minority of women and minority and colored people in the country that just simply were not pertain to their roles, and that they needed to be taken to heel. So redemptionism is an old concept in the United States, and it dates back as far back as the Civil War. What's so dangerous about it is that it is very reactionary and it's very authoritarian. It has no middle ground. It is completely an absurdist ideology. You're not going to reason with redemptionism. You're not going to be able to negotiate with redemptionism because it's simply an appeal to this idea of superiority, of cultural or ethnic or racial superiority of other people. And it's very appealing to people, particularly people in the South, the Midwest, and the Rust Belt. And it's not surprising that it's there. I think one of the biggest problems I have with a lot of modern history is that we don't get taught the history of the Ku Klux Klan and the South after the Civil War very well. A lot of people assume that the South is the only place where the Ku Klux Klan existed, and that could be further from the truth. The Ku Klux Klan was popular in large swaths of what we consider the Rust Belt today, in Oregon and Colorado and California, New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut. The Ku Klux Klan became a national movement, but its membership and its power was strongest in the South. But that did not mean that it was isolated to there. The politics of Indiana were dictated quite heavily by redemptionist Democrats that had the Ku Klux Klan support and were even members of the Ku Klux Klan during the 1920s and the 1910s. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is that I think a lot of people are confusing the rise of Trump with the rise of Nazism, and that could be further from the truth. There's a historical connection between redemptionism and economic turmoil. Historically speaking, this is nothing new. A rise of a Donald Trump-like person is nothing new in American politics. This is an old story that is being replayed over and over again. My concern with this is that it now is attracting not just redemptionists, but also neo-Nazis, but more importantly, a more dangerous organization, neo-Confederates. Both of these organizations are white supremacists, and both these organizations tend to use Nazi iconography, but they also use Confederate iconography in their movements. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this, I think, better explains the rise of Donald Trump, and why authoritarianism is becoming more and more popular amongst the minds of his supporters, the Trumpists. Well, these Trumpists, all you have to do is look at the places where they're from, and you'll see that it has a history of really positive populism, but it also has a history of redemptionism. And that's because redemptionism is, by all accounts, the king of identity politics that exists in the United States. It is so prevalent and it's so dominant in this political spectrum that it's very difficult for us to even see where it ends and begins. And that's because it's simply an identity politics system. I mean, redemptionists can be claimed as ultra-nationalists at times. But when there's somebody in power they don't like, they're as anti-government as you could possibly get. So let's really understand that. The reason why a lot of these states and a lot of these people in these counties didn't like Barack Obama, but they liked the policies, but they just didn't like Barack Obama, a lot of that can be explained by redemptionism. There's this idea that the republic is somehow in turmoil, and that we need to redeem the republic by becoming more moral and stronger people. This just falls in line with the neo-Confederate, the South will rise again kind of rhetoric. And there's a reason why it's appealing to people. There's a reason why George Wallace, of all people, a Southern Alabama, segregationist governor, was so popular in places like, Indiana, Ohio, Utah, Oregon, and Colorado. And it's not because everybody in those states are racists. It's the fact that there is racist elements that exist in those states. But more importantly, there's redemptionist elements in those states. This is what I call passive racism, or basically racism by de facto, not by de jure. And that is basically put, there's a lot of Americans in this country that I don't think are actively racist. They don't look at African Americans or Hispanics and say, oh, those people are lesser than me and they're inferior to me. It's more of a bias. They naturally assume that African Americans and Hispanic people that they're dealing with are less educated than them or worse off than them. Even though by and far, most of these people belong to the working class and the middle class. Most African Americans are not in poverty, but a third of them are. So why is there that bias? Because it's that redemptionist bias. White Anglo-Saxon culture. And I now say just white American culture is what it's become, is seen as the norm. This is America. This is what it's supposed to be. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is because redemptionism, I think, is more dangerous than neo-Nazism. Neo-Nazism in the United States is nothing new, and it's been around. And the fact that you have idiots coming out of the woodwork and all over the place as neo-Nazis is not going to lead to a rise of neo-Nazism. I think what the left needs to understand, and what people need to understand, is that the reason why Donald Trump rose to power was not because neo-Nazis voted for him, and all of a sudden there's a slew of people who are neo-Nazis. Donald Trump is not proposing Nazi reforms. That's my problem I have with that. This is not fascism. Fascism is a whole other degree. It's authoritarianism, yes. There's a sense of ultranationalism, yes, and those two things are very similar to fascism, but it's not the same. This is redemptionism. This is an American political byproduct. This is the byproduct of demagoguery. This is the byproduct and a project of oligarchy to basically divide the populace. Not only are we supposed to champion the philosophy of the oligarchs, we're supposed to embody their principles. So this is the reason why Donald Trump rose to power. Donald Trump rose to power not because he was promising, Lebensraum or, revoking the Treaty of Versailles. He rose to power because he represented this idea of the authoritarian, moralist. Ironically enough, Donald Trump is considered that. And he's going to lead this moral crusade to Washington. And we were going to redeem the republic from 8 years of a monstrous campaign, of a monstrous president who is ruining the virtue of America. And, Alex Jones, Rush Limbaugh, pretty much everybody, Savage, Fred Savage, I think is his name. These radio talk show hosts who basically are borderline crazy in their dialogue. These are not neo-Nazis. These are redemptionists. These are guys that are talking in the same pale, the same line as Huey Long, who was a redemptionist, who used this authoritarian, once again, authoritarian dialogue to implement, reforms, yes, but basically at the expense of minorities and people who were marginalized in the society in Louisiana. So I beg everybody to look up George Wallace and Huey Long if you want to begin to talk about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not a Nazi. Even though neo-Nazis like Donald Trump, neo-Nazis and redemptionists have a lot of things in common, and they agree on a lot of the same things. The only thing that I think has changed is that redemptionists no longer are anti-Semitic or anti-Catholic. Go back to the 1920s, they were anti-Semitic and anti-Catholic. Catholics were seen as a threat because they were papists and they didn't belong to the Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture. They were Italians and German and Irish, and they were therefore naturally inferior to the Anglo-Saxon Protestant man from England and Scotland or Wales or wherever. You know, that's the notion. And so I think that's the important thing to understand. Redemptionism is what the Republican Party represents right now. And just because it's veiled, you know, just because the Republican Party has a sense of veiled agendas against minority groups, well, that's redemptionism too. This is for the greater good of the Republic. I mean, that's something that you're going to hear a lot from redemptionists. This is for the greater good of the Republic. This is for the greater good of society. We need to protect people. Trust us. They throw a lot of moralist platitudes at us. And they usually are surrounded by people who have the same kind of authoritarian mindset. But wholly on these issues, these are self-destructive organizations. It is the reason why Richard Nixon went down in a blaze. And it's because he was an authoritarian. He was part of this redemptionist idea. He truly believed that he was going to save the Republic from some great turmoil that we were in. Even though this was just simply the growing pains of a new culture and a new society forming as a result of technological as well as social development. There's nothing radical about this. It just was happening. But in the eyes of the redemptionists, this core class of moralists and authoritarians, this was seen as an unacceptable threat to the morality and the prestige of the United States. You know, African Americans and white people having sex with one another, marrying one another, was seen as abhorrent. African Americans having the same civil rights and the same level of acceptance in society was seen as topsy-turvy because it was breaking the quote-unquote natural order of things. You're going to see a lot of impulses towards these concepts, and that's because it's natural. The problem that we have in the country is that there's a natural reactionary element that exists in this country because we hero worship the past a lot. We talk about the Founding Fathers as if they were these, sages on high, when these were mortal men that were completely fallible, that made a lot of mistakes, a lot of bad decisions. And ironically enough, they'd be the first ones to tell you that. Abraham Lincoln. And ironically enough, the Civil War is the reason why this group obsesses about the Civil War, because this is the birthing of the mythos. This is the birthing place of the mythos. The Founding Fathers and the Revolution is the background, but the birth of redemptionism, where the mythology begins, is with the Civil War. And so it's this very romanticized, almost, Greek epic in American discourse these days, when in reality, this was a hard slaughter. This was a hard fight. This was by far one of the most brutal wars in human history. And it is by far and beyond the most brutal war that the United States was involved in. So why is there such a mythos surrounding it? Well, for a lot of liberals and moralists, Abraham Lincoln is such a huge key figure. And what happened in the Civil War on the side of what we consider moral liberalism was that we liberated slaves. We made arguments that all citizens had basic rights that were protected by our institutions. So the Bill of Rights was not just something for the federal government. It was a rights that we had access to regardless of where we were at. These were universal rights. These were rights by citizenship, not rights by nationality. But for the redemptionists, this was a romantic period of time because this is the birth of the cause. So the Civil War was not about protecting the oligarchs' economic system of slavery. It was not about basically protecting the absolute political power of the Democrats in the South and their ability to basically control and dictate the policies of the nation granted on them due to their alliance with the Northern Democrats. I mean, we forget for like 3 decades, the South and this Democratic Party dominated American politics. It wasn't about protecting that sense of autonomy. It was about, states' rights and this very romantic and flowery language that goes around it. And of course they bring out Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. They love talking about these two when it pertains to their interests. But they don't want to talk about the other founders. They don't want to talk about Alexander Hamilton. They don't want to talk about, hell, even George Washington at times. Washington is one of those kind of figures that they like to see, but they don't like to hear. And so you begin to understand where this comes from. Redemptionism is a nationalistic, is an ethno-nationalistic, if I could speak right, political ideology that is built on the great mythos of white superiority or Anglo-Saxon culture, or what we consider real American culture in the modern take, losing its virtuous position as being dominant. Because if we don't maintain this virtuous culture, then the republic's going to fall. Ignoring the fact that, how do you define virtue, and ignoring the fact that most redemptionists are a part of a lot of seedy circles, and they're more than happy to involve themselves in corruption when it benefits them personally. But let's understand, they don't care about that. Whatever they do is the moral act because they're the defenders of the republic. And so this explains Richard Nixon. This explains Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, what was he going to do? Oh, he's going to make America great again. Why? Because Jimmy Carter was a moralist, and ironically a Southern moralist, of all things, who basically felt that the United States should not be just a militarized empire. Although Jimmy Carter made mistakes and bad decisions, I would dare say Jimmy Carter is one of those rare cases in American history where I think that he had the right intentions, he just used the wrong methods. But Ronald Reagan, what was he going to do? He's going to make America great again. That's a redemptionist slogan. Because somehow the greatness of the republic was collapsing because Jimmy Carter was representing a changing culture. He was okay with the idea of moving away from carbon-based fuels and embracing green energy. He was okay with accepting intellectualism. So what you got with Ronald Reagan was an anti-intellectualist, ultra-nationalist, monolithic vision of what America is and what makes it great. So it's not surprising or shocking when Iran-Contra happened. Because once again, Ronald Reagan believes he is saving the republic. And so he had these scandals, and these were serious scandals. And the irony is that these scandals are talked away by the movements, by the media in this country, because they didn't want a quote-unquote another Watergate. What there was Watergate was an eye-opener to the problem with redemptionism, with ultranationalism. It was an open view of what happens when you allow the state and the oligarchs too much authority. Because they end up taking, you give them a hand and they take, the entire arm. So, I mean, the basic thing I want to point out is that redemptionism as a political ideology has not left the country. If we think that the redemptionist tendencies in this country ended because Martin Luther King and Malcolm X stood up and, actually challenged it, then think again. Jeff Sessions is a die-in-the-wool redemptionist. He thinks that he's saving the republic, that he's going to bring America back to this moral authority. And, the thing about redemptionism is that it's not blatantly racist anymore. It's racist by de facto. It believes that its culture, the culture of real America, is superior to the culture of not real America. And this culture infallibly, represents more of what we consider the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant values over others. But now they've added, more and more Catholics and more and more Protestants. They've tried to bring the right-wing religious fundamentalist group into the crowd, which is not surprising. Because once again, this is a moralist crusade. Redemptionism is about saving the republic from the other. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about. So whenever I hear people talk about Donald Trump as a Nazi, I think it'd be a good idea to remind them what he really is. He's a redemptionist. He's going to make America great again. And he's going to bring this moral authority back to the White House. And he's going to save the oppressed masses of America from the obscene and immoral actions of the others who have basically manipulated the system for ill-gotten gains. If that sounds familiar to you, then look at our history. Redemptionism always seems to boil up when there's economic, downturns. When the economy doesn't seem to do well, when there's political scandal, when there's problems in this country, redemptionism always rears its head because it's appealing to a lot of people. It's a natural reaction. It's impulsive to a lot of Americans because it's a cultural phenomenon as well as a political one. Once again, guys, thanks for watching and have a good day. Please comment below. Any ideas you guys would like me to talk about, be more than happy to comment in the bottom. Any ideas of how I can do a better job with this, comment below. And once again, thanks guys for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow.